I'm excited that you guys are all here. So I know it is Labor Day, and I'm sure we have plenty of plans and barbecues and things like that. So I appreciate you guys getting on ARCHway's virtual education and awareness event. Tonight we are going to share stories of hope, stories of recovery. So Brian, Sieve, Matt, Kiefer, and Jon Singer are going to share a little bit about their journey to recovery and also a little bit about recovery housing and the impact that that had on them personally. They are all St. Louis friends and have all gone through recovery housing, but I'm going to read a short bio about each of them. So for those of you who don't know, I am Emily Young. I am operations manager for ARCHway. ARCHway is a 501c3 nonprofit that provides support and connection to resources to people who are struggling with substance use and co-occurring mental health disorders. We also do a lot of education and awareness, and the reason we do that, the reason we share stories of hope like this, is because it, one, teaches us about the realities of addiction, so what addiction is, what it's not, and the resources that are out there. And then two, it starts to open up these conversations around addiction, and we know that if we're not talking about it, nothing's going to change. So we try to open up those conversations. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen right now. And I'm going to introduce to you our first speaker for the night, and that is Brian Sieve. So Brian, for one, is an ARCHway board member, so we are very excited that he is on tonight. He's a native of St. Louis, Missouri. He spent many years teaching in both St. Louis and Chicago. He's an alumni of Temperance House before it was Recovery House of St. Louis. He does recovery work, pastoring, community organizing in Juarez and El Paso, Texas currently. And so we are just very grateful to have Brian on the team, and I'm going to let you take it away, Brian.
Thank you very much. You said my name is Brian Sieve. My pronouns are he, him, and L, and I am a grateful, co-occurring, dually diagnosed, recovering addict, hashtag mental health awareness. And I'm so grateful to be here. I do love, I'm honored to have served the ARCHway board for several years now. And my recovery story, to try and get through it in the amount of time we have, I really started in 2009 when I was sent to EAP by a principal that I loved at a school I loved. And I did my first rehab, and some of it took, but the reality was I just wasn't, I thought I was ready to do anything, and I thought I was actually trying really, really hard, but I was trying really hard to do my own thing. And I remember one of the things they told me was that I needed to go to transitional housing, and I was like, no way, I have an apartment, I've got to get back to work, I don't have time for all this stuff. And so I went on and I kept relapsing for a couple of years. And so I went back to rehab again after moving back home to St. Louis, and that time I realized I had to take all suggestions. And so there were many things that they did, offering me medically assisted treatment, helped me get clean. Working 12 steps helped me get clean. Taking all the suggestions helped me get clean. But one of the biggest things that I did, and it was the thing I most resisted, was to let me go to do recovery housing. And so I didn't know anything about it. And my social worker, Candace, shout out to Candace, who's, I think, program director still out there at Centerpoint in Weldon Springs, Missouri, outside St. Louis. She drove me crazy, but she kept telling me the truth. And so finally she said to me, she said, I think you have a chance. And we haven't had anybody try this place yet, but we think you'll do a good job. And so we want you to go out to this place called Temperance House. And when I went there, it was 2 houses up from the house I grew up on. It's now the Louisiana House, the recovery house. But it was the only house we had at the time. And when I came to interview, it was just John Stuckey and one other guy. And they were talking all kinds of stuff that I didn't even understand. And but I said, well, I'm just going to do everything I'm told right now. And I moved into Temperance House, and it filled up pretty quickly. And I didn't really know that. I don't think Jon had been the manager there very long at that time. But that house filled up. And one of the things that I think is important to realize is back then, we pretty much had the Oxford House model. And I'm not trying to put down Oxford houses, but Jon, as we all know, is kind of a guru, a genius at this. And so a lot of it was his lived experience, because as manager of our house, if guys voted somebody out at 2 a.m, that guy got thrown out on the street just for relapse. And so Jon would always say, we don't punish people for symptoms of our disease, right? And so it used to drive him crazy. And so what eventually became the recovery house came out of that moment of Jon's insight. And I was so fortunate to kind of be there at the beginning. I was also at the beginning of ARCHway. I was there, and Jon was selling free trade coffee and things, hoping to raise money when a lot of his family and friends got involved and said, let's really make this thing happen. And they have, which is really, I'm so proud of it. And so we started to open up Lewis Place, the second place, and then I actually went back to live on Rankin Technical College campus, where I was the assistant dean. But Jon and his dad kept after me to join the ARCHway board, and I did. And when I entered seminary, I needed some more flexibility in my schedule, and so Rankin wasn't going to allow me to do that. And so Jon kept trying to tell me, he's like, you need to work in recovery. You need to come back and give back to recovery. You need to come back. So I ended up working at ARCA. And then while I was living at ARCA, a bunch of the recovery house guys worked with me, and they kept telling me, you should come back and manage. You should come back and manage. And it's funny, I told Jon at one point, yeah, I'll think about it. Why don't I go look at the place or whatever? And so I had a meeting to go see Colton Baker at the Pendleton House, Pendleton Forever. And so we were going to talk about whether I was going to come back and live in the recovery house and maybe manage. And that day there was a booklet being made, and it already had my name down there as a manager. So Jon knew I was going to come back and do recovery house. And that's how I got back involved in recovery housing. Why was it important? I think recovery housing was the most important part of my recovery, because I needed a pack. I needed peers. Before I was going alone at my recovery, and I was able to, in my mind, decide for myself what was right, what was wrong, and that just didn't work in early recovery. It was, of course, the cliche, my own thinking is what got me to where I was. So I couldn't get myself out of that with my own thinking. I went to all boys high school. I'm from a big family. I'm used to having a pack of guys around who keep me in line. Very few people can keep me in check, but fellow addicts can read right through my BS. And then living with them really helped. And I'll tell you, when I came back to manage and live in the recovery houses, that helped me into the long-term recovery phase, because it's hard in a different way when you get to that point of recovery, where you're like, how am I going to really make this a lifestyle? I'm beyond craving. I'm beyond, it's always there, but it's just not bothering me every day. But my insane thinking makes me want to keep going back and use it. And so staying connected to that community has really been important for me. Some of the things that we did in the recovery house from the very beginning that still continues is Jon made me chore master. And I wrote out all these insanely detailed lists of what each chore was supposed to be. And that helped prepare me. And when Jon finally got to take a vacation and go out of town, he left me in charge. And that's the model that he continued with Recovery House. And so one way to look for recovery housing that is effective is to see, do they prepare and train leadership from within, from among the people who live there? Are they peers? Do they live with the people they're managing? Because that was all a key thing to my recovery and to Recovery House. Other than that, I think there's probably a lot of things I could tell you, but I do think it's one of the most important parts of my recovery. So when I moved here to El Paso, the job I had right away was as a case manager, and I managed 100 clients who were in the DWI drug court for El Paso County courts. And my job basically was to keep them sober so that they didn't go back to jail. And one of the things I found over and over again here was so many guys were in a variety of situations that if we had recovery housing here in the way that we had it, the way I knew it in St. Louis, it would have saved a lot of them a lot of suffering, a lot of relapsing, a lot of going back to prison. And so it is something I am passionate about. Something I do hope to continue to build here because it is a necessary part. The final part is when you have been in the intensive part of early recovery, where your whole world revolves around staying clean and sober. That's one thing. That's hard. But then when you try and reintegrate back into your life, into having a job, into having relationships, things like that, that is when you need to still be around other recovering people so that you can do that transition. Because otherwise it's feast and famine. You'll have what Percy Menzies calls deprivation syndrome, right? Well, we can go without all this for a while, but when we come back to deal with life, we're not prepared to do it. And that's why we need other people. And the great thing in a recovery house is you have people at different stages of their recovery. And so that's very helpful. You can move on and then you become a leader just among your peers. And then maybe you work yourself up to being a chore master, a number two, a manager, or maybe just you make a successful transition out of the house. So hopefully that's some information that you'll have questions for me later. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. That was great. That was a good little overview in 7 to 10 minutes. I'm proud of you for fitting all that in that 10-minute time period. So just like Brian said, there will be time at the very end for questions and answers. So you are welcome to put your questions into the chat and I can help facilitate that Q&A at the end, or just hold them till the end. So next up is Matthew Kiefer. So Matt Kiefer was born in Florissant, Missouri. He has a year and a half of sobriety and is manager of Recovery House of St. Louis. He's also one of the executive team members of MoPros, one of our local peer coalitions. And in addition, Matt works for the unions in construction. So thanks for being here tonight, Matt. You can take the floor.
All right. Thanks, Emily. I appreciate it. Extremely grateful to be here and to share my experience. So I guess I could start with kind of how I started in addiction. Started not so young, but kind of young. Played a lot of sports in high school and had a couple of injuries. And during one of those injuries, I was prescribed prescription pain medication. I really enjoyed the feeling of it. And at the time, I had some distant family that was struggling with addiction. I come from a family of addiction. And once I realized that I really, really liked the feeling of what I was doing, the prescription, it was right around the epidemic of pain meds when that started. So I was able to get refills on prescriptions and stuff like that. I did do that. I got refills when I probably shouldn't have. And then I started to kind of reach out to the distant family that was involved in drug addiction. And they just so happened to have a lot of that stuff. So that's kind of how I got introduced to it. I had a lot of friends that got absorbed with the epidemic as well. So we had a lot of connections as far as that drug went. Which I can say that's how I got started. I ran with that for about 5 years. And I was, like Emily said, I'm in the painters union. I got into the painters union when I was about 17. So I always made, pretty decent money and was able to fund my drug addiction, for as long as I could. So therefore, I ran with it for about 5 years. Once I got real bad. I did transition to heroin, unfortunately. And I did that for a couple of years. And then my family had, kind of put their foot down. They showed me some tough love, and they kind of made me go to treatment. I was relying on places to live from them, and they said that I couldn't stay there anymore. My sister said I couldn't come live with her. My mom, my dad, they wouldn't let me come there. So therefore, they kind of, forced me to hit a rock bottom, and I had to go to treatment. So my dad came, pick me up. He took me to treatment personally, and it was kind of devastating, but also somewhat of a relief. I didn't know what I was getting into. He took me out there himself, and I can remember specifically, he said, he could just see the devastation in my face because I could not continue to do what I wanted to do, unfortunately. So he took me into treatment. We got set up with the caseworker there, and I did my intake. So that was my first treatment, and that was in 2015. So overall, I did 3 inpatient treatments, and then I also did 3 outpatient treatments, all within about a 1.5 year period. So therefore, I got a lot of education through those. It was a lot of trial and error. I wasn't successful the first couple of times. I think I had tried an unsuccessful MAT plan. I wasn't as serious about my outpatient. So the inpatient was a 2-week period, and then the outpatient was what you were supposed to follow up with after that. So I just never really went with my MAT plan, my recovery plan, until my 3rd treatment. And during that 3rd treatment, I decided to do something different. I was actually going in and out, talking with my caseworker, and trying to come up with a good plan because I really didn't have too many options. So now, after completing the treatment, I probably could have went back to my mom's house, but I decided to do something different. And when I was talking to my caseworker about it, Oxford came up, Recovery House of St. Louis came up, and I think a couple others came up for sober living as an option. And I actually looked into it a little bit, and my caseworker reached out to Jon Stuckey. Jon Stuckey came out to Centerpoint Hospital where I was doing my inpatient treatment, and he met with me, and he kind of told me a little bit about recovery housing, the Recovery House of St. Louis in particular, and said that I have the option to come there if that's what I wanted to do. So that's what I decided to do. I came out of treatment that 3rd time, and I moved straight into the recovery house. My family was willing to help me a little bit as far as groceries and kind of get me on my feet, as long as, I'm committing to this program. So that was definitely a blessing. And they actually helped with rent for the first 3 or 4 months. So I came to the recovery house. I really didn't know what to expect when I walked in. It was the house that I came to was kind of up and coming. There wasn't too many people here, and some were serious, some weren't. But therefore, there was a lot of improvements that could be made. So I kind of jumped in and tried to help as much as possible. And I seen some guys that really had something that I wanted. So therefore, I jumped in, and I actually gave some effort at doing this thing. I joined the brotherhood of recovery, the camaraderie. We attended meetings together. We were held accountable to doing our chore, as Brian was talking about. We were held accountable to, urine drug screens weekly. So there really wasn't much room for error. And I did really well for the first year. And, I kind of got in the way. And I've had a couple of slip-ups since 2015, but I am now at a 1.5 year sobriety. I do manage the Humphrey House where I came in almost 5 years ago. I do manage this house now. I take pride in it. I really do, think that it's very important to include a lot of guys that come through here with some kind of a responsibility. It gives them a sense of purpose, to start, but it gets you close to them, and it lets you get to know them and to help and gives them, like I said, a sense of purpose to helping other people. And I think that's the key to sobriety, is to help other people and to feel a sense of purpose and to really buy into the process and to see the rewards of it. So if you that's really one thing that I wanted to talk on tonight. I was thinking about it earlier. Us as addicts, we struggle with our thoughts, right? It rests in our mind, and we struggle with our thoughts. So if we're in an inpatient treatment, or let's say an outpatient treatment, and we're hearing all these people talk, and we're learning all these different things, and we decide to just stay at the same place we were before we went in, or we don't change our people, places, and things, we're struggling with the thoughts of what other people are thinking about us, right? So if I would have went back to my mom's house after inpatient treatment, I would have been concerned about what she's thinking. You know, why is she being so uptight? Why is she all over me? That kind of thing. And it doesn't really give you much room to grow. When you come to recovery housing, you get around people that you really don't know. You know, you really don't know them. You get to know them. They don't judge you. You don't judge them for the most part. You know, so it kind of gives you room to grow in your own recovery, and you're not really worried about what other people are thinking. That was huge for me, and that's kind of what I think about on a daily basis, is how much room I actually have to grow without, you know, the concern of what my family's thinking. Do they think I'm doing well? Do they think I'm not doing well? Am I worried about what they think? You know, and that's what I used to always do. I used to try and please them and show them that I'm doing the right things, when really it's all for me. You know, this is for me. Yes, it's a plus that they actually feel comfort that I'm doing the right things, but also this is my recovery. This is what I need to believe in. And I think I try to do that as much as I possibly can. I try to, you know, stay away from trying to please other people, and trying to control things that I have no control over, which I have no control over what people think at all, you know? So that's one thing that I've learned in this process. As far as recovery housing, I recommend it to anybody. A lot of people that are struggling with drug and alcohol addiction, I recommend it to. It's very beneficial. There's a lot of resources, a lot of help that is given here at Recovery House, and other recovery houses. But I enjoy being here. I do not plan on leaving anytime soon, and I am extremely grateful for the people that showed me the way. And that's what I try to do each and every day, is to show other people that same way. So I appreciate you guys listening. I think I'm close to 10 minutes. Am I not, Emily?
Right there. So that's
Okay.
perfect. Good
Yes.
segue.
Thank you guys very much. Hope you guys got something out of it. And yeah, I look forward to listening.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kiefer. I did want to, Jon Stuckey's name is being brought up a lot. I think there are a couple people that I don't recognize on here. So Jon is actually our founder. He's the founder of ARCHway Institute. He's no longer active in ARCHway because of his new career, but he's our founder. He is in recovery himself. And so one of the reasons why I wanted Brian and Matt and Jon is because they've all been around each other in their recovery, and they've all helped each other along the way and grow. And that's one thing you see with recovery housing too, or that I've noticed, is just the kind of rippling effect of recovery. So you'll hear Jon being mentioned, or Colton being mentioned, or Matt being mentioned, or Brian being mentioned, because they're all really helping each other grow in their recovery. So that's just one little interjection I wanted to make. But I'm going to go ahead and introduce Jon Singer. He is our third and final speaker for the night. He is in long-term recovery with 21 months of sobriety. He is a certified peer specialist for Sauna Lake Recovery Supportive Housing. He spent several years as a manager of Recovery House of St. Louis. He participates in MoPros, our local peer coalition, and he's one of ARCHway's volunteer advocates for hope. So thanks, Jon, for being with us, and I will let you take it away.
What's up, everyone? So my sobriety date is December 22nd, 2018, right? And that's the same day I moved into a sober living facility, Recovery House of St. Louis. And that's not a coincidence. I'm not going to go back to, my whole story. But I will talk about a couple weeks prior to me moving in. I just got out of prison. I was homeless, using every drug known to man. Matter of fact, it was kind of difficult for me to initially even get in because I literally dropped dirty down at ARCHway for almost everything on the panel. But one of my conditions of my parole was for me to attend Gateway, and I got medication through ARCHway. And I met a peer specialist down there, Luke Thomas, that, he is really the first person, to believe in me, right? After so many years of just being lost in and out of prisons and on the streets. And like, I can tell that he cared, and he managed a house, in recovery house. So he started telling me about it, and I figured I'd give it a shot. I remember the night before I moved in, it was middle of December, freezing. I had nowhere to go. I just walked the streets, till that morning, till I can get into my intake. And I was still a little messed up just from using before, right? And I was really freaked out and paranoid that they weren't going to let me in because I had no idea, like, of the rules and regulations and like what that it took to get in. So I remember doing my intake with Scott Hawker, and he can tell that I'm just freaked out, and he had me do a urinalysis, and he said, "Are you going to be dirty?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he's like, "That's fine, man." He's like, "Just when you drop clean, I'll let you off restriction, And he's like, "You don't have, you don't have to use anymore. You're in the right place." And I remember that day so vividly, because I never encountered anything like that ever. And as the days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, I, started, relationships started to grow. And, we would have these 10 o'clocks, and I would see all these guys come in and really get vulnerable and talk about their experiences and talk about what they were going through, and the longer I stayed, it just became apparent because you'd hear John Stuckey, Jordan Hampton, Colton, and all them guys you were mentioning come in and talk about compassion, love, tolerance, and these guys really walked the walk. They just weren't, talking just to talk. And that attracted me, right? I wanted to be in a role them guys were in, right? Helping the guys coming through the doors, and that's one of the things, Kiefer, you touched on too, is the brotherhood and camaraderie of it all, right? I think if I had to really pinpoint one thing, that made me, take sober living like I did, and I took it serious, right? And this is why I made a career out of it, is the brotherhood, man. You were never alone, right? If you were even starting to have a bad day, somebody was asking you or pulling you to the side, like, "Hey man, what's going on?" And that literally saved my life on so many occasions, right? So you're in a household with men, who've experienced the same things you experienced, and some a lot more, right? So they know exactly what you're going through. And if it wasn't for that camaraderie we had, lifting each other up, going to 10 o'clocks, being there for each other, I'm not sure if I would have made it, right? And that is the magical thing about sober living, and like somebody said earlier, I don't remember who, but you get people that come in and they're not so serious about it, right? But what I've learned is, you give them the same chances and opportunities, and you befriend them just as much as you would the people that you see more eye to eye with, for lack of a better term. And another thing I really wanted to touch on, the accountability. When I came in, I had no idea how to live, right? I was in addiction for 20 plus years. Being in an environment like that, and just you get to learn, like doing your chore, opening up about things that just being able to talk and get vulnerable. You really start to grow, right? I finally transitioned out of recovery house, I think almost 2 months ago, right? And it's in so many ways I wouldn't have been ready for it if it wasn't for like the structure they have and sober living has as a whole, not just recovery house STL, but just sober living as a. So I worked for Mo Better Living for a while, which is another recovery house in St. Louis. And I tried to instill a lot of what I learned into that, it's because, like I said, compassion, love, and tolerance, it's what saved me. And if it could just me showing that, if it can save just one more person, you know what I mean? I think that what I do is worth it, right? And I hope I'm doing as good a job as the guys I've seen when I first came through and when I still needed help, right? But I appreciate you guys letting me share, and